Let's keep going.
Okay, and now we're in it again.
Welcome back to the Academy Podcast. My name is Austin Parenti.
And my name's Aaron Mejias.
And we are slugging through the forms
Woo!
of Plato's Republic
Here we go.
yet again. Last episode, which was only 5 minutes ago for us, we talked about... Let me summarize what we just said. We were able to better define the forms and shadows away from the conventional understanding to something a little deeper, something that's maybe even a little newer. It seems like this has been recently visited, you were saying, by philosophers in the 70s.
That's 20 years.
Yeah. Right. And so here's the simple way of looking at it. Plato is saying that there are objective, eternal, unchanging truths and forms, ideas that govern the universe. and when we see something in this world, we're seeing the shadow of it, yes, but what he means by that is we are seeing something that is transmitting the true idea. Let me make it more practical. We use the Helen example. He used Helen. Helen of Troy was the most beautiful woman ever. Sparta. Taken to Troy. Helen was the most beautiful woman ever, but she is not beauty itself. She is simply a conduit through which the form of beauty was being transmitted. But because she is changing and she will grow old and that beauty will fade, she is not beauty. She's not the eternal idea of beauty. When we look at a painting and we say it's beautiful, hopefully, we don't mean that painting summarizes all beauty everywhere. No. It's a conduit through which beauty is being transmitted.
Yeah.
The truer, deeper form that is out there.
That is beauty.
That is beauty. Yes.
Unpredicated is itself.
Cool. So that's where we got. And now I believe we can move on to some of these nice little allegories he gives us. Maybe that can help even keep this kind of on track.
Yeah. So because now we're talking about, okay, well, Aaron, Austin, how do I get from this realm of opinion that we're all relegated to here in the physical world?
Yes.
And go to knowledge.
Exactly what I'm thinking. Like when I look at this painting, I assume classical art was probably, this is just coming to me, I'm so brilliant. Looking at classical art was not meant to make me say, wow, that's beautiful, but to make me meditate on the form of beauty. Is that true? Or am I just making that up? Is that just a cool idea? Like Renaissance art, is that kind of what it was about?
Well, I mean, a lot of it was religious imagery meant to evoke. But I mean, yeah, you're right in the sense that it was meant to evoke not just an emotional response, but it was meant to reflect
something deeper.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't leave me just thinking about the painting itself.
Right. Something
that helps me transcend and look towards something deeper. So that's the question now is how do we move away from looking at the beer, just the little item that's on our table, and start to really understand the forms and the ideas that are out there.
Right. So
practically.
Right.
That's so the hard part.
Right. So then now we have the metaphor, the dividing line in the sun.
Yes. I'm trying to find that. And I was so pleasantly confused by it when I did read it. Where are we? Wasn't there a nice little diagram?
Yeah, there's a diagram in the book somewhere.
I have the visible world and intelligible world.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Yes, so he keeps using the word like the good.
Yeah.
I'm not so dumb to think, oh, he means good and evil, right? But can you help first define? I think it would really help to have a classical Greek Platonic understanding of the good. I didn't hear that term until I went to college. What is he talking about? The good. Because he's going to liken it to the sun in this metaphor. And he's talking about general...
Well, I can't... Okay, so the good being goodness itself, unpredicated, the very essence of goodness.
The form of goodness. Now,
the form.
That form is king above the other forms, or the other forms are inside of that?
Okay, yeah, so that's why he likens it to the sun. So, like, you have the realm of sight and opinion, right? Which you can have knowledge of. However, it is the realm of opinion. Sight, it's our physical reality. And he says, well, you can't actually see this world. You need the sun, right? The sun gives light, which allows us to see things. You know, your own faculty of sight does not produce its own light and allow you to register the image. You have to, you know, you need it's light reflecting. You need the sun.
Yeah.
So he likens that to the same thing of, well, the intelligible realm, which is the realm that is reflecting upon that of the forms, the essences of
Using
things.
reason, right?
Reason, yeah, that's where it gets complicated. We'll talk about that.
Put that on hold.
So then, so then if just as the sun allows us to see the physical world, the form of goodness acts as the sun in the intelligible realm. It allows us to see the forms.
Okay. That sounds so cool in theory, but now in practice. So he's saying that to understand beauty, it is truly goodness that is shining the light on the form of beauty.
Yes, it makes it so. It makes it what it is, because here's the thing: is that, well, because for Plato he would say, well, beauty is also a good.
So it's kind of,
so you see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
like to say, like, again, to use as Plotinus would say, is that he would say, Plotinus would argue that there's the intelligible realm, which is the realm of the forms, and they all are all possessors of that which is the essence of goodness in themselves. So they also are part of this idea of being and partaking. And so then what are they partaking from? Where do they possess their being from? Well, that of goodness itself, because this idea of something being perfectly what it is in and of itself is a sort of goodness. It is eternal, it's universal, it is unchanging. Okay, so then they all participate in this form of goodness that allows it. Goodness gives it its intelligibility. We all seek to know what is good. We don't want to really know like what is bad, because everybody seeks what is good for themselves inevitably. Okay. But then Plotinus would take it a step further to talk about, however, there is also the one. That's all he says. He says there is the one.
just leaves it at that.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's helpful.
And then he goes,
Thank you, Plotinus.
And he says there is a one, and then the one is he, and then he says he creates intellect itself.
It's like a personal.
The one.
He says he, though, not it.
The one from which goodness emanates in and of itself. He is the unpredicated beginning of all. The one.
So he's talking about God, a God's, not Zeus. We talked about that already.
The one.
That's all we know. Well, thank you, Plotinus. Very enlightening today.
There you go.
You've helped us tremendously with your grand definitions.
We'll get there.
So okay, so that's the dividing line. It's metaphor.
The dividing line specifically. So those are the two realms: the realm of opinion and the realm of knowledge, which we've kind of gone over.
Both guided by their own.
Right, but the
Virgil.
dividing line is this idea of, well, where's the flip occur? Right, so where do we go from doxa to episteme?
Help.
And so then,
Yes.
and so this is where Plato starts to introduce. Okay, well then you need reason, you need dialectic, and you need math. And he's saying that through those conduits, those forms of study, you end up interacting with that which is universal. You begin to struggle. You begin to realize.
Those are three things I would not have put together. Like they don't fit in a category nicely in my head. Okay, hold on. Reason, we've talked about that.
Well, yeah,
lot.
you like
that
reason,
makes sense.
Yeah. You need reason just to go from opinion to knowledge.
Dialectic, is he talking about the one where it's like synthesis or thesis?
No. Remember, go back a few episodes where we said I said dialectic is rigorous conversation between people, drilling down to get to the truth.
What they're doing in this book.
Right? Yeah, exactly. Okay. What they do in all Socratic dialogues is that dialectic is something about
Got it.
Conversation.
So not the Hegelian dialectic.
Yeah, not
okay.
Hegelian dialectic.
I like that, but not that. Okay. And then mathematics.
Yeah.
Let's give it to them. They're universal.
Yeah, because knowledge, the definition of episteme is not because techne is also a form of knowledge, but that's like a grounded, like a skill, like how to use something, and that therefore I understand what a thing is because I know how to use it. The knowledge episteme is the theoretical knowledge of what things are in theory. And so it requires reason and dialectic, but you also need the math, because then you can kind of see, okay, well, I understand that that there is something that is unchanging. It is universal, that you don't question a number. It's not in a state of flux. And so that allows us to kind of begin to comprehend further.
So he really is meaning math in the way we kind of understand math, like
just understanding
algebra.
math, just
Like
just in
geometry.
theory. Well, he's talking about, again, just things in theory, not in practice. We don't want to use math particularly just for, like, he says it later on. He's like, you don't want to use it just for like trade and just for like accounting and things and just keeping track of numbers. You want to just study math and begin to reflect and contemplate and have discussions on, well, wait a second, there is such a thing as one, just the number one, the essence of one in itself. And it's like,
Plotinus was excited about one.
well, or two, like anything.
No,
it's like,
kidding,
I can't,
yeah.
like, you know, like I may be able to divide and multiply things, but then they're still just that number.
Yeah.
And they just possess those numbers. And so then it's like, okay, well then why is that? Like, how am I able to understand that something has that sort of reality?
Well, okay, so math touches on the deeper objective truths, unlike literature. I could totally see that.
Right.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Okay. So again, let's make can we make that practical? Does he give us an example of using those three to, I don't know, like get deeper in your understanding of beauty? Like, can we practice this, or is this still kind of...
Yeah, he kind of gets into this idea of like theoretical knowledge begins with a hypothesis. So you kind of are, you hypothetically think, well, obviously if there are numbers like this, that in geometric planes, like, okay, so a triangle is a triangle because it has 180 degrees and 3 sides. And so certain universal laws to things, and that begins with theoretical mathematics. And so you begin with the hypothesis, and then upon reflection, and then in that vigorous dialectic within a community of people that are also seeking truth, using your reason, you prove that there are universal essences that can be reflected upon.
Then how does that help you get deeper into your understanding of a form?
Nobody knows. There you go. See?
Thanks,
Congrats.
Plato.
Woo!
Wow, these Greeks are great.
Well, here's the thing is that, yeah, like that's a big critique. It's like, well, then how do I go from my theoretical knowledge? Because here's the thing. The form is an existential thing. It does not begin with a hypothesis. The whole point of it having an unpredicated being is that it's not hypothetical. So then how does my hypothetical knowledge of something get me to this idea of forms? He doesn't say. Congratulations, you've made it this far. So it's like, it is a little frustrating because you end up saying, well, so I have the dividing line, right? So I just moved from opinion to knowledge. But then then what transcends knowledge? Like it's a pure unadulterated acquaintance and understanding. Like he says, it's an acquaintance. You have a deep, how to say, like he would say, like you always belonged, like it's like you're in community with them, that you are just, you have an acquaintance. You're with the forms, like you have spent time with them, ground. Right? You've spent time with them, and it's like, well, how would I?
Like,
how do I do that?
Give me the
I'm not going to answer it yet.
Oh,
I'm holding this to the last bit of it. Because honestly, scholars are not really, they don't know. Because, I mean, Julia Annis would say that, okay, well, the philosopher has a theoretical or hypothetical, and then, or she would say a reflective, and then she would then say has a pragmatic or practical, and then she argues that actually those two things clash and there's no resolution with the philosopher. So she was saying that, and this was really interesting, kind of getting to your point. She was arguing, well, why does he compare the philosopher king or the philosopher ruler and the philosopher to doctors and and captains and things like that? Well, obviously, as we were saying before, is that because ruling is a technique. Right, that to possess that which is to be, because again, it's all about, we have to relate it back. It's all about justice and all about like, why is justice good for myself and why is justice better than injustice? Well, then that means justice is a technique, because we're comparing the philosopher to somebody who has a practical, pragmatic knowledge of what is justice in and of itself and is able to apply it in the same way that the doctor has a theoretical understanding of medicine that informs their technique, or the captain. But then all of a sudden, when we start talking about the forms, that's not the case, because we're talking about, well, having a theoretical knowledge of the form, but it doesn't completely translate into, well, how do I take that and make that? All I understand is that things just participate. Yeah, exactly. I just know that these things participate. So the only thing one could really say is that, okay, well then if you're able to kind of reflect upon the forms, which we don't even know how you get there, then we would know that, okay, so then maybe how we can kind of understand that some of our actions may be more just than others because we understand that there is something that is just in and of itself. But like you said, there's a wall. How do we get there? There's the philosopher all of a sudden now is not the pragmatist who is able to reflect upon things and understand the things in and of themselves and apply it as a sort of use their episteme to apply it as a technique in statecraft and ruling. Now they're just people who just reflect on things, and we're like, well, how do you transcend to that point? We don't know. They're just
math.
Math.
Thanks.
Well, thanks. Well, then now we're looking. We're like, well, now all of a sudden we're back to the square one where the philosopher is completely unequipped to rule because they're just people who just want to sit and reflect. And then it's going to get worse when we get to the cave because they don't want to leave the realm of the forms.
Right. They have to be coerced to come.
They have
back.
to come. They have to lie to come back. And it's like, okay, well then that means that it is not just for them to come back. So then that means justice is not good for you in and of itself. We just proved that justice is not better than injustice.
Right.
We'll get there, but I mean,
but he makes the art.
Right.
Yeah.
You should be frustrated.
Yeah, because okay, it's not even like okay, I'm not incredibly frustrated with Plato. I'm frustrated because I see the wall.
Yeah.
I see a wall between understanding the forms and living in this world that we do. And I feel like it makes me want to journey all across this world to do to do the Aristotle type thing where I look at everything and try to determine universals based off of what I'm seeing, universals of maybe the form of love as I analyze what love looks like in all these different cultures. But I'm just looking at shadows the whole time anyway. So you can only if all I'm looking at is a shadow, it's not that it's not real, and it's not that it's less real, but it's not the form, and I can't construct a form.
Well, it depends. Do you want to be a Platonist or do you want to be an Aristotelian? Like you have to honestly, like you kind of get to this point where it's like, okay, you have your arguments that stack up against Plato and your arguments that stack up against Aristotle. Pick one if you're going to pick out of the two. But here's the thing: is that also just be comforted in the fact that nobody really is a Platonist. Like a pure Platonist, because typically,
I don't know if anyone could be. He
right, exactly. Because, because people eventually later on you read the Neoplatonists and you're like, oh, this is much more comfortable. You're like, oh, okay, this is good. They clear. It's still Plato, but they just clear it up. Plotinus is being the best example of that. So then people who are quote unquote Platonists, or the Christian philosophers later on in antiquity who kind of who take the works of Plato and use that, they really are just Neoplatonists. Like they're Neoplatonists. Like people don't take Plato purely. They take a lot of his ideas and they kind of put a refinement on it and then see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But then you also have the Aristotelians that are like it's different. You can't really marry it. I know people want to. And I mean they're not as far apart as we like to think as we demonstrated in the last episode, but there you go.
Okay, so I'll put a chill pill on trying to solve this wall issue.
Yeah,
for
we
Plato.
won't tonight.
I'm sure.
Well, I mean, again, I have a theory, but not to the end.
Okay. Well, we're doing good on time, so we can proceed as planned. That's
to the cave.
Here we are. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Next is the cave. Can I do some summarizing?
Sure.
I'm not even going to look at my book because I know it so well at this point.
Oh.
So I think, as I said in the last episode, Plato expresses this image. What if you and all of your friends were born into a cave? You were chained and you were looking at a wall in such a way that you couldn't move your head to turn around. Behind you was a source of light, like a fire. And as people and objects would pass in front of the light, but behind you, you would see the projection, the shadows appearing on the wall of the cave. If that's all you saw in your whole life, you would think that those shadows passing on the walls are the things themselves, when in actuality they're behind you, Well, Plato says if you were able to get your shackles off of you and turn around and look at the fire, it would be so bright you would be tempted to turn back around and you might even think for a moment that the fire was fake because it's so blinding. and that the real stuff is actually the shadows. But if you're able to overcome that and you start to even walk out of the cave itself and you see the deeper, brighter light, which is the sun, it would be such a painful process, but eventually things would become clear and you would be able to see the true realities of things. And this is what I think, anyway, and then the point is that person who has left the cave would then go back into the cave to try to recruit his friends out, but they would think he's crazy and he's trying to like kill them because of how painful the process is for going back up. Now, before I interpret what all those components mean, did I cover all the elements?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
I want to read a passage actually
Sure.
from Julia Annis, who I just referenced. And she talks about the cave in this way. She actually compares it to an old film about Mussolini's fascist Italy.
Hey, my homeland.
Well,
not the fascist part, but Italy. I'm Italian. That's the point. It's late.
The only successful visual translation of the cave's term of metaphor that I am aware of is Bernardo Bertolucci's movie The Conformist. It has often been pointed out that the cave is a dynamic image, whereas the other two are static. And no doubt this is why we have had to wait for the availability of movie techniques for Plato's image to be successfully interpreted in other than philosophical terms. So this is where she considers the movie. I'm going to skip a little bit. The human condition is not a social vacuum. There are people in the cave manipulating the prisoners as well as the prisoners themselves. The prisoners are prisoners within a given political system. They are political conformists. So important to point out that the cave is a metaphor, yes, but it's not. It doesn't exist in a vacuum, right? Because there are people that made the fire that are forming the shapes. So he is literally talking about Athens. He's literally talking about you are in a political system and you are in a society that is twisting you and is trying to convince you of the truth of things that are mere shadows in the realm of opinion.
It's very
and
deliberate.
Distracting
Wow.
you. Yeah, we act to think like, oh, well, he's actually just making a story up, like to try to explain the point. No, he's being very literal about society is working against you to convince you of something that is not true. Okay, so then to go on to kind of bring that point home. They are political conformists. The protagonist of Bertolucci's film Marcello is a conformist in Mussolini's Italy. Fascist Italy is portrayed cinematically in terms of images, reflections, and fragmented appearances. Such a society models for us practically well the kind of society that Plato saw in contemporary Athens, a society interested in surface and bella figura, impressed by showy and unsound schemes and grandiose buildings, a society where what matters is not truth, but presenting a good public image and manipulating public opinion. A society like this has no interest in encouraging its citizens to develop their own moral views. It has every interest in encouraging conformity to received opinion. By dominating the media, as we put it, and getting people to care only about the images presented to them, seeing no need for a positive moral response of their own, Bertolucci's development of Plato's cave brings out how much an individual is encouraged to make false choices and to do things he can recognize to be unworthy of him if he lives in a society that positively rewards false and superficial values and encourages intelligent people to make only a cynical use of their abilities. This is a point which is easy to miss in the cave if we are concentrating on the philosopher's struggle for enlightenment. Plato, though, does not forget the importance of society and the formative power it has over the kind of lives people lead. He is so concerned with reforming education to produce good people that we are justified in seeing in the cave not only a general point about humanity, but a picture of false education and the wrong kind of society.
Okay, so that's bigger than I thought it was.
I needed to read that. That was awesome.
That's really cool. So not only is it yet another loose picture of
transcendence
forms and shadows,
and moving,
but it's also political for him.
Yeah,
and it was political for Italy, fascist Italy, and I'm sure a million other civilizations in between.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Any society that encourages you to and again, it goes back to education.
Yeah,
and being just, right? Because it's like, are you being educated to regard to not rigorously develop moral views and reflect upon the essences, universal truths of things? Or are you taught, hey, listen, it's good for you to go to college so you can have a good, well-paying career, so you would go without want, and you can buy the things that you want to buy, and you can have that 3 weeks of sweet PTO. And it's like, you see what I mean?
It's weird that, yeah. No, I get it. That's always been a weird one to me, because it's like, who specifically is saying that? It's like a mix of voices that makes it weird. It's my parents, it's TV, it's corporations, and it's
so
the
who in
government.
your life is creating the shadows along the wall?
It's a little more black and white when you look at, a fascist or communist nation that's like, specifically like. Anyway, okay, so that's a broader interpretation for the cave than I was going for. Well, no, because he then says, he's like, so the philosopher king would be the one who is able to exit the cave, bear the light of the truth, and then kind of bring that back down into his society.
Right.
So that's kind of how he ties it into the greater republic framework that he's setting up.
Right.
The small issue that you had brought up to me off mic, and then you mentioned it a little bit earlier in this episode, is, so again, if justice is an inherently good thing,
and how does it benefit me?
Right.
Like,
It
not
benefits
just
me
society, but me.
and society, both at the same time. They're both equal.
It's better than injustice.
Right. They're parallel. If society does well with justice, then people do well with justice. And so why would a philosopher who touches the forms and is happy,
doesn't want to leave, happy, wants to be in contemplation?
Then he says, well, we would have to lie to the philosopher and tell him to go back down into the cave to get people.
Right.
So that seems to be countering that initial idea.
And it's not even to bring people back up to the light. It's more of, he will be able to just see things more clear and then rule justly and change things.
Oh.
Yeah, he's not even like, let's rescue people.
Now that you're saying it, I guess I just interpreted he would do the nice thing and pull people out.
Nope, not everybody can transcend.
Because they're not intellectually
They
capable?
just don't want to look at the flame. It's also, and here we go. Here we are. Yeah, I know. It's like, well, why would he leave? And so there was an article that I read, and I wouldn't say article was 40 pages long, or 30, sorry. And it was like, and it was all about how, well, you can look at it where, like, it is the most just thing for them to go down. Like, to make that sacrifice and to go down. Like, you see what I mean? It's like, well, how is that good for them? And it's like, okay, well, but upon contemplating the forms of justice, what is most just would be for them to go down and rule and to show others, and like rule justly and to show others the truth. And it's like, okay, I guess I can see that. Like,
yeah, it's still kind of weird though. Like, help explain this to me a little bit. So a philosopher goes to his forms, he whatever that looks like. He does his little math. He does his geometry homework.
Does his geometry, and he goes, oh, yeah.
And he says, oh,
I now know what justice is.
I know what justice is. And so then he returns to the society, not to help them understand what beauty
to rule justly,
but just to rule them.
Well, yeah, I mean, it would help them understand, but it's to create a just society,
okay,
right?
Oh, okay.
I mean, people
he's
again,
going to
classes,
use,
right?
Yeah. He's going, okay, yeah. So he's going to use what he learns by studying the forms, not to communicate the forms, but to rule justly.
Also, again, all these things are a bit unclear, because how's the education system of the republic supposed to be run?
Nothing is clear.
Right, okay.
That goes without saying.
But I mean, he... In order to really escape, though, it's all about, there are people that will go and realize the truth and then come down and change things. But then the change is always going to be like a fundamental revitalization of the education system, in which now people are going to be studying exactly what Plato was talking about. No longer will the dynamics of the cave remain the same.
Okay. So it changes the world of the hero.
Yeah. I mean, I don't.
So
is it a metaphor for the soul? I don't know.
That's exactly what I was taking this. So politically, I think we understand the implications of what our takeaways are, kind of.
Yeah.
But so if this is a metaphor for the soul, what's he talking about?
Here we go. Let's say that the cave is a process of self-discovery.
Okay.
And let's say all of a sudden we begin to realize, just as an individual, because we don't know. See, here's the real question. What makes somebody get up from their chains in the cave? He says nothing. He says, suddenly one person will get up from their chains. The chains will just break on them, and then they will turn around. How? Why? He says nothing. It just passes. It's just a sentence. Why is that the case? And then he's going to look at the flame, and it brings him pain. He begins to reflect. He closes his eyes. He struggles forward. What drives him? How does he know that there may be something out there? Just because the world around you may be fake and you start to realize that things are not as they seem to be, what compels you to begin to even understand that maybe perhaps there is an existential plane in which there are things that are as they truly are, in which all things possess their being from and partake within? How would I even get to that point? Math? Triangles? No. So then what drives that? Now here it is. This is my big theory.
Is it the thumos?
It's the thumos. Is it this wall that we're talking about? This is where Plato begins to take on the very and scholars. Every time I read them, they did not want to acknowledge this, and I got this burning sensation that they're just turning an eye to it because I don't think they want to recognize it. I think they see it, they just don't want to realize it. The very deeply religious realm that Plato has. This concept of revelation, this concept of the immortal soul. Oh, wait a second. Oh, now we're talking about, the forms being this transcendent, universal thing that exists, and they're all in tandem, and they come from that which is goodness itself. Oh, what if I just decided this idea of breaking the chains was revelation? Wait a second. Something just clicks in me. Something is revealed onto me that is mysterious, and I began to wait.
Yes.
There is an eternal. And then I begin to reflect, and through my reason, I hit a certain point. But wait a second, my reason can only get me so far. I hit a wall because I am limited. However, the forms are not. They are real essences.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then I sit and reflect with them. However, what becomes the difference? So this is where now we're on this religious dimension of where, this idea of transcendence, this idea of revelation, this process of self-discovery. And I began to realize in myself that, wait a second, my soul is eternal. That where I come from, I possess in myself this essence. The very fact that I'm able to understand this reason, where does it come from? Plato says, my soul is immortal. My soul comes from the realm of the forms. It knows it inherently within itself. It is a process of knowing oneself. And if that's the case, to knowing goodness of itself unpredicated, I have to spend a lot of time. What does that mean to spend a lot of time in contemplation? Okay, well, I just transcended, and all the knowledge contained within me, I spend a lot of time. Well, that sounds a lot like to me that it takes on these dimensions of even meditation, of prayer, of deep personal reflection.
Yeah.
And you're starting to, then and we don't want to acknowledge that, because then scholars go, well, your reason, Plato, that doesn't make any sense. Your reason can't get you that far. And he goes, yeah, you're right. It can't. His philosophy now takes on a dimension of faith. His philosophy is that, your reason, in dialectic, you're out of the cave now. But what makes the forms what they are? What are these essences? What does it mean to be universal? What does it mean to have a soul, to have eternity, to spend? Because he's saying you're going to spend eternity with these forms, and why would you ever come back down? Oh, well, because you have an obligation to do so. Because by knowing the forms in and of themselves, all of a sudden you have this, not all of a sudden, but now you have knowledge of your obligation. You've been informed that you don't truly belong there in the physical world. You belong somewhere else. That's who you really are. However, you are confined to the shackle of your body now, and you have a responsibility in accordance with those essences. This is we're in a very deeply religious, faith-based thought here. It is not, we're now beyond reason.
Yeah.
And this is where we're frustrated because we go, well, come on, that doesn't make any sense in terms of a systematic philosophy. And Plato's probably giggling all the way to the bank because he's thinking to himself, you're right. You're absolutely right.
This guy's insane in like such a good way. Like literally is it fair to say he pretty much like started at least popular philosophy, but like if not,
I don't know.
But like everybody who's come after him has gotten there because of him, and they look back at him, and he's taking on not what seems to be a philosophical approach to this at this point, but a religious, faith-based one. That's so funny.
Yes. So now, and then you're asking yourself, well, what does that mean to be in acquaintance with the realm of the forms?
It sounds personal.
Mm-hmm. Deeply personal. Deeply personal to the point where he says you die and your soul transcends and comes to know the forms. It is part of them and then comes back down.
When you say revelation, you're meaning like divine intervention, like a form putting it on.
I wouldn't say that the forms are transient, like that they have like not like they have knowledge in of themselves and can move and work, because they're just, I don't,
more like
I mean, what
pillars?
are the forms?
They're
They're essences. I mean, it's hard to explain, but what I mean by revelation is that, well, you suddenly come to a knowledge of something that was revealed to you. Well, by what? How? Well,
something external.
Well,
on the other side of the wall.
Well, but even if I was going to say something internal, it would still be saying something is external, because the soul came from somewhere else itself. It is just housing your body. So it's housed within your body, I should say. So then, So yeah, exactly. And so this is where now, and this is why I was kind of making fun of you, like you didn't get it when I was saying Plotinus says the one. Well, who is the one? The one from which all things transcend.
He was
from.
talking about God, right?
So in my opinion, my personal opinion, there is absolutely no way to get around the fact. If you want to follow Plato to his conclusion, and it's particularly the Neoplatonists, and man, there are going to be people who are going to lose their minds listening to this podcast. They're going to say, "Aaron, you're an idiot." But I stand by this: is that you cannot the argument is that, you know, the early Christians went and just co-opted the Neoplatonists and the Platonists to just fit Christianity,
appropriated it.
Well, guess what? It fit too damn well for it to be an appropriation, because there's no way you can tell me that Plato and his students, even Aristotle and then Plotinus, the Neoplatonists, that they didn't have some sort of conception of being itself unpredicated. And we're talking about divine. Now, he may just call it goodness, but that goodness itself would have to have some measure of an intelligence of like what good is in order for all these things to come from. If you get what I'm saying, like we're like
they're not inanimate bodies,
right. There has to, because it goes on ad infinitum. You end up in a logical fallacy, because then it's like, well, where does that goodness come from? Where does that come from? And it goes on and on and on and on. It has to stop somewhere. Something that is now, was then, and always will be.
This makes me want to pick up Augustine next, honestly, and kind of see not the appropriation, but can I ask?
Well, Plotinus first.
Well, okay, Plotinus clarifies.
Yeah, but then he I think he goes and finally acknowledges. Well, I mean, I think Plato also acknowledges, because in his speech before he dies, you know,
Socrates or Plato?
Socrates, sorry.
Okay.
You know, Socrates, before he dies, he makes that speech before he drinks the cup, and he says, I tell you that your soul is immortal, and it comes from comes from the heavens, and that there is this one being. I do not know his name.
And that's what Plotinus was.
Well, yeah,
talking
Plotinus
about.
is saying, that obviously there's got to be something that is informing all of this, because then it just doesn't make any sense.
That's
Like
so
eventually your reason
interesting.
hits your point, and then you literally transcend.
And that was Socrates' last words.
Yeah,
Like,
according to Plato, his
Sure.
last lecture was that you have an immortal soul. I'm not afraid of death. I will live forever, and that there is one in which all truth comes from.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So tell me, so I want to understand more completely your draw in your comparison between Socrates or Plato into Plotinus into Christianity. You said we said appropriation, but we said that's probably not the right word for it. Would you even call it like fulfillment? That's such a strong word, and that puts such a heavy emphasis.
Yeah,
on
that's a strong word, because then that would make it sound as if like, because if I said like, oh yeah, it's the fulfillment, then that means like then that would be me saying, oh, I agree with Augustine and all of them. So I'm not going to say that.
Okay.
What I would say is that they take it to its logical conclusion within the context of, they take it to its logical conclusion in terms of a spiritual sense. Now whether that has to necessarily be Christianity, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it could have been any other religion that would have advocated for something along the lines of divine being or divine beings that were being able to take
Yeah.
advantage of it, but Christianity just ended up fitting the bill. But the thing about Christianity, though, is what's interesting is that you run into an issue, because is it Christianity that's being influenced by the Platonic philosophy to fit it, or is the Platonic philosophy being influenced by the Christian? You see what I'm saying? So it's like maybe Christianity is this one thing, and then all of a sudden our understanding of Christianity is morphed because we're looking at it through a Platonic lens. Or is it vice versa, that we're understanding Platonic philosophy now
That's a good
because
point.
of...
Yeah, and that's how worldviews tend to function. They're lenses, and especially stuff like Plato. I feel like I start looking at everything differently. Like I have a whole new set of vocabulary words, not just the Greek ones, but like the terms and ideas he communicates. You start evaluating different everything through him.
Right. So to get past
That's a
these
good question.
but to get past these two injunctions, right? So one is why would the philosopher come back? And I would say it's because true eudaimonia, right? True happiness and what is really just does involve an idea of self-sacrifice. It does involve this idea of a giving up of oneself. That justice is really not about, like, because we always, justice is what's good for me. And it's like, well, maybe what if our definition of what truly is justice is not about what justice is what's good for you? Because your conception of what is good for you is flawed now. Because what is truly just maybe is a value that transcends whatever physical happiness or whatever about you is you in the here and now, but instead has to do with a value that you incorporate within yourself and you participate in. You see what I'm saying? So then therefore I would be compelled to come back because I understand what is just. And maybe I want to spend my life in contemplation, but I would know that if I spent my life in contemplation, I would be living a lie. Because I would know what is truly just would be for me to go back and for me to realize that there are values that I'm immortal, that this is not the real world. And so my understanding of justice is a value that I must participate in the here and now, and I have a responsibility to that. That is what brings true happiness, and this is where the frame of the debate completely changes, because it's not about, oh, well, what's just for me, what's good for me. It's like, well, what's good for me is what's good for everybody else. It's about external values that I decide to participate in.
Yeah, is it altruism at that point? Is that
Yeah, I guess it's altruistic, but it has a lot to do with it. Like scholars always frame the debate as, okay, well, this obviously flies into the face of understanding what is just for them, because we just showed that the philosopher is more happy if he spends his life in contemplation. And I'm like, but that is not what truly justice is.
It's like to bring in Cicero, my buddy. Is it fair to say the philosopher spending his life in contemplation is what's seemingly beneficial to him?
Yes. what he would think.
Right,
What
but
he
what
would
is
think.
truly beneficial is what is honorable, and what is honorable is to go back into the cave.
Right. Right.
I can get behind that.
Right.
That
Well, I
sounds-
mean, but to make it Platonic would be
Right, to
would
change
need
the words.
right, because we're flipping it on its head. Well, it's like, oh well, you've achieved eudaimonia, true happiness, and a well balanced soul by living in reflection, and then Plato goes, no, you just missed the point. There's another reverse here, where all of a sudden, now that I've transcended and I've reached the height of the
gosh.
summit, what you thought it would be contemplation. You thought that contemplation would be the well balanced soul. You thought that reason now rules, and then now you stay. He says, no. It's a life of action. You go back and you live out the virtues. You live out the values in the particular.
This is nuts.
Yes, and then in the second one, it's like, well, how does that work? How does he leave the cave? I'm like, well, obviously there is a deep spiritual dimension that exists within the individual human being within Platonic philosophy that has to do with that reason is not the end all be all for Plato. Obviously, it's not. There is a realm beyond ourselves in which, yes, we contemplate, but acts upon us, and we simply are mere participants.
Oh my gosh. We're not at the end yet, and of the book.
Yeah, we got another 4 episodes, I think.
Yeah, and so I don't want to.
But I mean, you can end the book there.
I mean, well, because I'm sitting here, I'm like, I thought like what I do with everybody. No, I'm kidding. But like, I thought I could put Plato in a little box that said, yeah, Plato believed in his forms in his cave and his philosopher king, and that's that. This is like the most mysterious man. and I just get the feeling that he, and maybe it's the romantic in me, I just get the feeling he is this genius, and he knows it. like he has all this, and he's just almost been like toying with humanity for 2,000 years now. Like, gosh, I just wasn't expecting this.
Yeah, and I mean, what are the forms? There's no form of a chair. There's no form of a movie or of a book of particular physical instances. They are universal essences in which things that are in a state of flux in their particular physical instances participate in and inform us of their value. Their things participate in those essences and receive their essences from those things that are unpredicated, universal, unchanging. Things are, they have being, and they partake within those essences. So a thing that may be beautiful, may be delicious, it could be large, it could be good, it could be just, it could be true. They all receive those values, those essences from these things, which are those things, truly unpredicated. And the way that we understand them is through rigorous reason, study, dialectic, theoretical math, but because they are existential things, we can tether them. We can become acquaintances and begin to know them intimately as they are in and of themselves, and begin to see the physical world in a more true light, not in a less real light, but begin to realize that these physical instances are just that, are just instances that receive their essences, receive the content of their being from that which is the form. And then therefore the physical world, in a sense, takes a back seat, and we transcend.
Amazing. Well, we've got a lot to think about until next time,
Don't we?
but I guess that concludes our section on the forms, and of course that conversation's never gonna end.
I hope not.
Even especially obviously through this book, but even through future books, I'm sure it'll come up again and again and again. So for the meantime, this has been truly, again, I keep treating this like it's the last episode of the series. It's not.
It's not, but
it's a big one.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, I kind of hope that the other upcoming episodes are gonna, in a way, kind of pale.
Well, yeah,
And as they should.
Okay. Okay.
As they should. The falling action, of this is going to be that, well, we've reached the form, so what else?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, but the very last episode is the immortal soul and the nature of goodness.
Well, that's
and so
that sounds
and it's
good.
I think once again it's going to drive home my point to where people are afraid to realize the religious dimensions of Plato. I think that they'll show their true colors in the very final episode. So.
Well, thank you, listeners, for joining us, and be sure to keep an eye out for those next few episodes. We really do appreciate your support. It's so exciting to see our numbers grow every week. So, just make sure that you're leaving good feedback, those 5-star ratings on whatever channel you're listening to us through. Also, be sure to follow us on our social media. Aaron keeps those up to date weekly with some fun posts, and also you can always email us your feedback or comment it in your venue that you're listening to us through. But you can always email us at theacademypodcast@outlook.com if you have any questions, comments, or thoughts or recommendations. I'm open to recommendations. I'll say
that's all that matters.
So yeah, until next time, thanks for being here. Or listening, I should say, since you're not here. But you do have being, even though you're not here.
Correct.
See you guys.
Yeah, see ya.